I'm an attorney at Massachusetts here in Boston, chair of the steering committee of the Boston Lawyers Chapter of the American Constitution Society. We're extremely excited about tonight at ACS. To be in this place, the significance of which you all know and will be discussed as the meeting proceeds here on Constitution Day or close to it. We're thrilled that all of you could attend and were able to honor Chief Justice Marshall for her life's work, which is an inspiration and model for each of us. We're also privileged to have Governor Patrick here with us, founding national board member of ACS, among other illustrious qualifications. In addition, I was thrilled to learn just this afternoon that all 7 justices of the Supreme Judicial Court plan to attend, and I see them all here in attendance. What a testament to Chief Justice Marshall and to ACS. This is easily the biggest night in the life of the Boston chapter of ACS. It doesn't take a whole lot, but I feel like we're going above and beyond tonight. I'm going to keep this as short as possible, since I and no doubt you would rather hear from the folks down the lineup card. But I need to say 3 very quick things. First, there are a few people who need recognition for the extremely hard work they put in putting this event together this evening. In particular, I'd like to thank, of course, Governor Patrick and Chief Justice Marshall for being with us. All the members of the judiciary who are here this evening, including Justice Rubin, who many of you know is a co-founder of the American Constitution Society. I'd like to thank all the members of the steering committee of the Boston Lawyers Chapter for putting this event together, in particular Rob Whitney, Honorable Margaret H, Susan Bunker, and Liz Lorenstein, who did his work. Our advisory board, many of whom are here today and are listed on the back of your program. They've all been good enough to lend us their names, but also to engage in events around the calendar, work to secure support for this event and others, and to generously serve as resources for the steering committee and for our membership. I want to thank ACS staff, Sarah Knight, Michelle Dash, and Alex Sheff in particular, who have been helpful in making sure the trees run out of time. We have a number of volunteers here tonight from Northeastern and other law schools and undergrad. Otherwise, this thing would grind to a halt. And last but certainly not least, we need to recognize our sponsors, without whom this whole thing would not be heaven and health. Wilmer Hale, Edwin Proctor, Vince Levitt, Foley Hoag, Clements Law Office, Clements and Pino, Block and Bruce, and Icon Office Solutions, and everybody at those firms who work to secure their support. The second thing I need to do is talk a little bit about membership. The goal of tonight, in addition to providing a forum to discuss the issues that are important to ACS and to honor Chief Justice Marshall, is to raise the profile of this organization and increase membership here in Boston. If you are not a member or your membership lapsed, happens to the best of us, please find a membership form in your program. You got one on the chairs, and if you don't have one of the nice volunteers at one of the tables will be happy to hand them out. As a member, you'll be in on our regular events throughout the year, and that here in Boston and nationally. You receive our issue papers or other publications, and you'll otherwise be in the know of all things ACS. And last and third, I'm privileged to have the job of introducing Caroline Frederick, Executive Director of the American Constitution Society. We're very happy that Caroline was able to come up this evening, all the way from DC, and for her to present our annual award to Chief Justice Marshall, in whose name the award will be known going forward. Caroline joined ACS in July of 2009. Before that, she was Director of the ACLU's Washington Legislative Office. Before that, General Counsel of the Legal Director of NARAL Pro-Choice America. She's worked on the Hill as Chief of Staff to Senator Cantwell, Deputy Chief of Staff to Senator Daschle when he was leader. She's also worked in the White House as Special Assistant to President Clinton for Legislative Affairs. Caroline has been widely published regarding legal and policy issues, including labor law, anti-discrimination law, and human rights and civil rights issues. At Columbia Law, she was the Harlan Fiske Stone Scholar, and she co-founded the Columbia Journal of Gender and Law. But in addition to all of that, Caroline has been an inspiring leader and guiding force for all of us who work so hard to support ACS up and down the ranks. We're thrilled that she's here, and with that, I'm going to put you over to her.
Introduction. I am so honored to be here with all of you tonight in what I can actually claim is my hometown. When I travel, I usually associate some experience with the place I am actually born here, and I'm very happy to be here tonight for the 4th annual Constitution Day celebration for this chapter. This is also the ACS 10-year anniversary. 10 years. How quickly that time has flown and how much ACS has been able to accomplish. We have more than 200 strong, active lawyer and law student chapters across the country. We are on virtually every law school campus. In addition to the work here in Boston, and Chicago, New York, and San Francisco, where you might expect us to be strong and vital. We are helping to shape the debate in Kentucky, in Oklahoma, and in Montana, where Jeff Clements will be speaking later this week at the ACS Missoula chapter. But because of all of you in the room today and around the country, we have been able to make this possible. But I think you all know as well as I that this is only the beginning of our engagement. As Martin Luther King so aptly said, "Justice denied anywhere diminishes justice everywhere." And I'd like to think that there could not be a more fitting description of the ACS mission. We are working to ensure justice everywhere in America. And I am so proud of our first 10 years, a decade in which we worked to strengthen rule of law and our Constitution, even as the right-wing activist legal movement continued its long campaign to erode those core constitutional values. For these 10 years, we have worked with the Boston legal community to preserve and protect those core values. And Boston's mark on ACS is strong and can be seen by looking around this room. And of course, if it were not for our founder, Justice Rubin, we wouldn't be here today at all. I want to recognize a few people in addition to my dear friend, Eva Rubin. And I do this with a little anxiety because there are so many VIPs in this room and one is always anxious that one doesn't leave somebody out. But I want to make sure everybody knows that we have Frank Michaelman here, who is one of our esteemed National Advisory Board members. And of course, we are very grateful to have Governor Patrick and Chief Justice Marshall, but to have so many members of the Massachusetts Judiciary, Chief Justice Ireland, and all 6 Associate Justices of the Supreme Judicial Court. Have Judge Sandra Lynch, who's the Chief Judge of the United States Court of Appeals for the First Circuit, and other distinguished members of the federal and state judiciary. That is truly an honor for us, and I think is truly a testament to how far ACS has come and how much the Boston chapter has really accomplished. And we could not do it without all of you. And as Noah said rightly, if your dues have lapsed, please join. Those of you who are never members, please join. We really need you. We need you to join in that fight. As Martin Luther King said, justice denied anywhere diminishes justice everywhere. We need your help in that engagement. So tonight we find ourselves in the home of the Supreme Judicial Court, the oldest appellate court in the Western Hemisphere, whose members are the keepers and protectors of the oldest and most often copied Constitution in the world. And we are humbled by the opportunity to recognize and name the Boston ACS chapter's annual award after retired Justice Margaret Marshall. Justice Marshall is a jurist who exemplifies not only the driving ethic of ACS, but who has made her legacy as a passionate guardian of the Massachusetts Constitution as it was conceived and drafted by John Adams and his compatriots. And indeed, your Constitution, and I I would like to say my Constitution, since I was born here, adopted in 1780, served as a model for the U.S. Constitution. The Massachusetts Constitution, as I'm sure you all know, contains 3 parts: the preamble, the Declaration of the Rights of the Inhabitants of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the frame of government. John Adams considered individual rights so essential to the formation of a just government that the Declaration precedes the frame of government, unlike our national Constitution. Anticipating what have become viewed as our essential and fundamental constitutional liberties at the state and federal levels, the Massachusetts Constitution Declaration of Rights includes prohibitions against unreasonable searches and seizures, ex post facto laws, and the public taking of private property without just compensation. The protected rights include the freedom of the press, the right to petition our government, the right to trial by jury, and freedom of worship. The third part of the Massachusetts Constitution, the frame of government, established a government of separate powers with 3 branches: an executive, a bicameral legislature, and an independent judiciary. These precepts, which have become so ingrained in our society, are why we are all here today, to voice our allegiance to the principles that flow from the Massachusetts Constitution, and to honor Justice Marshall, who stands out as a leader in fighting for the values that John Adams embedded in that document. To say that the Massachusetts Constitution and the Supreme Judicial Court have been ahead of the curve is a massive understatement. Not only is the Constitution's substance and structure a model for democracies around the world, but the Supreme Judicial Court set to work almost immediately in interpreting it in furtherance of justice. Among many other landmark decisions, in 1783, the Supreme Judicial Court declared that slavery was incompatible with liberty and legal equality, as articulated in the new Massachusetts Constitution. And in 1842, it declared trade unions to be fully legal and not the criminal conspiracies they were deemed in so many other parts of the country. Justice Marshall, the 24th Chief Justice of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, and the first woman to hold that post, served from 1999 to 2010. And she followed a long path to this courthouse. Born in Newcastle, South Africa during apartheid, Justice Marshall found her calling as a champion of justice at a very young age. In college, she led a student organization, the National Union of South African Students, which was dedicated to ending apartheid. She came to the United States and attended Harvard College and Yale Law School. And Justice Marshall served in other posts before ascending to the bench. She was a law firm partner, president of the Boston Bar Association, and general counsel to Harvard University. When Justice Marshall was first appointed to the Supreme Judicial Court in 1996, she was only the second woman to serve, and yet only 3 years later, she became the chief. Justice Marshall authored more than 200 opinions in her time on the bench. Most notably, she wrote the landmark 2003 decision in Goodrich versus Department of Public Health. In that case, I think as so many of you in this room know, Justice Marshall was the first appellate justice in the United States to write a majority opinion for the affirmative proposition that same-sex couples do indeed have the right to marry. Justice Marshall wrote that the Commonwealth's Constitution, quote, affirms the dignity and equality of all individuals. It forbids the creation of second-class citizens, and the state has no constitutionally adequate reason for denying marriage to same-sex couples. And in the spirit of the Declaration of Rights, she continued, "The right to marry is not a privilege conferred by the state, but a fundamental right that is protected against unwarranted state interference." Since Justice Marshall wrote those words, more than 13,000 same-sex couples have been married in Massachusetts. The state legislatures turned away a proposed amendment to the Constitution, an idea that was supported by then Governor Romney, to undo the decision. Federal courts have turned down petitions to delay the decision's implementation. And in the grand tradition of Massachusetts constitutional jurisprudence, Justice Marshall's majority opinion in Goodrich blazed a path for other states to grant equality to same-sex couples. ACS across the country, and of course here in Boston, could not be more honored than to have the opportunity to name the Boston Lawyer Chapter Annual Award after Justice Marshall. John Adams wrote in 1776, "The dignity and stability of government in all its branches, the morals of the people, and every blessing of society depend upon an upright and skillful administration of justice." And Justice Marshall, you have lived up to that standard in a profound and meaningful way. So on behalf of ACS, I would like to present to you the first annual Margaret H. Marshall Award.
Justice Island, my colleagues from the Supreme Judicial Court, the Justices of the Supreme Judicial Court, Chief Judge Lynch, members of the Board of Advisors of the Boston Chapter of the American Constitution Society, the amazing staff of ACS, Justice Peter Rubin, one of the founders of ACS, distinguished guests and friends. Thank you for this really quite wonderful honor. I didn't know until Caroline told me that the award is going to be named after me, and I have to say that means so much to me, more than I can possibly. Whoever it was for making the award in this building, which I worked in so happily for so many years, occupying a position that I felt so very to hold. It's been just over 9 months since I took my last walk down those stairs, something that I did almost every night, usually when the courthouse was deserted or close to deserted. And it is wonderful to be back again. And what have those 9 months been like? Well, first, the good news. I'm not awakened by an alarm clock every morning, and I do not fall asleep in every concert. And I don't have to be so careful about what I say. And I don't know if there are any balloons here. That's an inside joke. Is there any bad news? Not really. But I have been able to spend more time looking carefully at what is happening to our country, this great nation that has given me such wonderful, wonderful opportunities, and looking in particular at what is happening to our system of justice, that jewel of our democracy. And I am troubled by what I see. Very concerned. promote the united constitutional values of individual rights and liberties, genuine equality, access to justice, democracy, and the rule of law. I can think of no higher purpose for any member of the bar or for any citizen, and how urgently your voices are needed now. If my 9 months of relative quiet, of distance from the hurdy-burdy of managing the judicial branch, of writing opinions, has confirmed anything, it is that the justice system of the United States, as we know and love it, is at a tipping point and will not simply survive unless we take strong collective actions now. Strong words, I know, but I believe them. Why? Access to justice is one of the constitutional values ACS promotes. And as we look across our nation today, can we really say that our courts are providing access to justice for all? Freedom and equality of justice are essential to democracy, said Boston lawyer Reginald Heber Smith in his landmark work on the law and the poor almost a century ago. Denial of justice, continued, is the shortcut to anarchy. The shortcut to anarchy, those words resonate with me. As someone who grew up, as Caroline noticed, in a South Africa riven by apartheid, I know in my bones the central importance of access to justice in any democracy, for I have seen its antithesis. In the South Africa, I used courts were the handmaidens of the powerful, enforcing apartheid's iniquitous doctrine of white supremacy and stifling all opposition to white economic and political power. Justice was not blind, it was a step to death. To promote the constitutional values of individual rights and liberties, genuine equality, access to justice, democracy, and the rule of law. The principle of equal access to justice, as you know, finds its most palpable expression in our state courts. There, our most vulnerable citizens come to secure their most basic needs: food and shelter, healthcare, physical safety. Many have no attorney. Many have limited English proficiency or are functionally illiterate. Rural residents must travel long distances to seek domestic violence and restraining order. And yet they turn to the courts, a place of refuge for many. How many? In 2008, the last year for which we have comparative data, there were 325,260 cases filed in federal courts. That is counting every case filed in every federal court, trial and appellate. 325,260, excluding bankruptcy cases. And cases filed in our state courts that same year, 48.5 million. As justice goes in our state courts, so justice goes in our nation. This evening is an evening of celebration. I want to celebrate all of you who are part of the American Constitution Society that in its own words, quote, believes that law should be a force to improve the lives of all people. I hold that same belief dearly. And so what can you take from this evening of celebration? I hope you will devote your considerable energies, your powerful voices, your brilliant expertise to making our state courts the jewels of American democracy they should be. An impossible dream, not for me. My inspiration, the words of the oldest written constitution of the world still being enforced each day, the Massachusetts Constitution. We are a government of law and not of men. When John Adams placed that phrase into the Massachusetts Declaration of Rights, quote, he was not indulging in a rhetorical flourish, said Justice Felix Frankfurter in a great opinion in 1947. He was expressing the aim of those who with him framed the Declaration of Independence and founded the Republic. The government of laws and not of men was the rejection in positive terms, the Justice said, of rule by fiat. Rule by fiat. In South Africa, as a young student, I faced the juggernaut of apartheid. founded on the principles of justice and equality, seemed insurmountable. But the impediments were surmounted. The principles of justice and equality prevailed. And in 1990, Nelson Mandela walked out of prison, a free man, becoming one of our time's most revered political leaders. And how did that happen? I have learned that when each one of us, refuses to accept what appears to be the inevitable, the consequences can be extraordinary. I thank you for refusing to accept what appears to be the inevitable. And may the American Constitution Society continue to grow from strength to strength. Thank you for this message.
Thank you, Justice Marshall, Governor Patrick, distinguished guests, friends. I'm Jeff Clement, the Boston Chapter Advisory Board for the American Constitution Society, and it is a great honor for me to introduce a friend of many of us and governor of all of us, Deval Patrick, and on this special occasion of actually, in addition to honoring Chief Justice Marshall's great career, and the American Constitution Society takes note of Constitution Day, which is the 224th anniversary this year of that September day in 1787. The delegates in Philadelphia completed their work on the U.S. Constitution. As the American Constitution Society reminds us, although the delegates completed their work, the American people and our courts were not done with that work. The first 10 amendments were necessary to ensure ratification of the Constitution, and we have not finished yet with the work to make sure that that Constitution protects, as it was intended to do, the liberties and equality and justice that is the promise of the American Republic. Tonight, we honor Chief Justice Marshall, one of the great champions of the liberties and promise contained in that Constitution and in our own Massachusetts Constitution, which preceded it. And we who are here tonight, and so many who are not here tonight, will be forever grateful and proud of her service and the legacy that she leaves behind. It is now my honor to introduce another great champion of that Constitution and its principles and promise of liberty, equality, and justice, Governor Deval Patrick. As I said, he is well known to many of us. For some of you, long before he was the twice elected governor and national bestseller author. He was a friend, a colleague, a law partner, a mentor perhaps, to some a formidable adversary in litigation, if not on the squash court. And he is a friend, neighbor, colleague of all of us, and we're so proud of what he has done as governor and before. His life, in many ways, is the story of America, the story of the best of America, when we not only remember our highest ideals, but work to make them real. That's the story, to me, of Governor Patrick's life, and one we've heard before because the telling is so good and meaningful to Massachusetts people and to America, but worth hearing again. He came to Massachusetts as a 15-year-old with nothing but an opportunity, with a scholarship at Milton Academy. And he really made the most of that opportunity. After Milton Academy, he went to Harvard College, on the Harvard Law School. He won the Ames Moot Court Championship and the award for the Best Oral Advocate, and upon graduation, he went on to clerk with Judge Stephen Reinhardt of the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. Governor Patrick then worked for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, fighting for equal justice, death penalty cases, equal voting rights, again for that promise that we have in our Constitution and work so hard to fulfill. Governor Patrick then joined Hill and Barlow, where he was a partner until President Clinton appointed him as Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights in the United States Department of Justice. In the years following his service in Washington, before his historic election in 2006, Governor Patrick was General Counsel, a senior executive board member of some of the largest companies in the world, including Texaco and Coca-Cola Company. Less well known, though, among his board work was his service on the board of the American Constitution Society in its earliest years, and he truly is among those, along with our Judge Peter Rubin, who made possible the American Constitution Society and its decade now of protecting, reminding, educating, fighting for the preservation of that Constitution, of those fundamental liberties and equality and the promise of America that we have seen so much of across the country now. And we're very glad to have Carolyn Frederickson here to reflect that as well. So he is a founder, in many ways, of the American Constitution Society, and we're so glad he's back to join us tonight, Governor Patrick. And one final thing I want to say about the Goodrich decision, as Chief Justice Marshall of the Supreme Judicial Court has been said, put so well a statement of simple, fundamental justice and equality that resonated throughout the country and continues to do so. Governor Patrick, before he was governor, was asked about that decision. Maybe correct me on that, he may have already been governor, but he was asked about the Goodrich decision, which was decided in 2003. And his answer is straightforward, clear, as usual. Our Supreme Judicial Court got it right, because all it did was affirm the principle that people come before their government as equals. That's the kind of clarity, honesty, and leadership that's characteristic of Governor Patrick. His life story is inspiring. I'm sure you want to hear his thoughts on this great occasion. So please welcome Governor Deval Patrick.
All my brothers and sisters at the bar, the fellow members of the administration who are here, and maybe most especially fellow citizens. I first of all want to acknowledge your founder, as others have, Justice Peter Rubin of the Massachusetts Appeals Court. Thank you, Peter, for your vision. Conceiving and launching a counterweight to those elements in the legal and larger political community who seem determined to take us back to some romanticized idea of the good old days. Days that for people like me and many of you were not that good. To Chief Justice Margie Marshall, thank you for your firm and steady leadership of the judicial branch, and most especially for these purposes tonight, the courage you showed in your decision in the Goodrich case. I know for that decision you have been called a lot of things. I call you a hero. keeping the lights on when gloom feels like it gathers around us. In some ways, we could not be in a better place to salute the spirit of the ACS. As you all know, and as has been referenced earlier this evening, John Adams, after whom this courthouse is fittingly named, wrote the Commonwealth's own Constitution. The preamble, so often quoted, I hope you will indulge me if I do so again in part tonight. The body politic is formed by a voluntary association of individuals. It is a social compact by which the whole people covenants with each citizen, and each citizen with the whole people, that all shall be governed by certain laws for the common good. The common good. So much has been written and debated about what is in the common good, what that means. My own idea is simple. I think it evokes a sense of community. Jeff referred to my growing up, some say the rough side of the mountain. I wish I could coin that phrase. Growing up in the 50s and the 60s on the south side of Chicago, often a lot of talk about what we didn't have. But one thing we did have was a strong sense of community. Because that was a time when every single child was under the jurisdiction of every adult on the block. You messed up down the street in front of Miss Jones, she would go right upside your head as if you were hers. And then call you. You got it 2 times. What those adults were trying to get across to us was that they had a stake in us. And that membership in a community is understanding the stake that each of us has, not just in our own dreams and our own struggles, but in our neighbors as well. And with that membership in community comes responsibility. In our administration, I've tried my very best to govern in that same spirit, in service of the common good. For that reason, we have invested in the public schools at the highest level in the history of the Commonwealth, even when the bottom was falling out of the rest of the state budget. We enacted the Achievement Gap Act, which gives us new rules and tools to reach the kids who've been stuck in that gap. Poor children, children with special needs, children who speak English as a second language. We placed additional emphasis on science, technology, engineering, and math education, mindful that these are skills on which our future economic growth depends. We've invested in the unglamorous work of rebuilding our roads, rails, and bridges, expanding broadband, extending health insurance to over 98% of our residents. We've partnered with local officials and community groups on new strategies to address violence in urban neighborhoods, especially among young people. And with an emphasis on education and on the innovation industries that depend on an educated workforce and on restoring our infrastructure, we are growing jobs here in the Commonwealth faster than 44 other states today, and coming out of recession stronger than we were before. Those are examples of what we have done. But the reason why we have made these choices is because each serves, I believe, the common good. And if your government serves the common good, then we will, all of us, bear our responsibility to improve the general welfare, not just for ourselves, but for those who come behind us. The common good, in that sense, has also been central to our progress in civil and human rights. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was quoted earlier this evening. He said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. His notion was very much that we all have a stake in the expansion of freedom and fairness to others. Loving versus Virginia, the Supreme Court's decision that struck down laws prohibiting blacks and whites to marry, was decided when I was about 10 years old. It didn't touch me then, not directly, but its principles expanded my freedom too. Those self-same principles were extended to gays and lesbians in Goodrich some 40 years later. So we celebrate Goodrich, it seems to me, for the same reasons an earlier age celebrated Loving, because freedom and justice always serves the common good. Today, that notion is in jeopardy. Not because the equation itself is in question, but because the factors have been turned right on their heads. The same folks who today say that religious fundamentalism is a danger to freedom abroad are busy trying to promote it right here at home. The same folks who say government should stay out of our private affairs want to tell women whether to keep an unwanted pregnancy, or you and I, whom we can marry. For these folks, freedom means freedom from responsibility. No responsibility for overcrowding, underperforming schools. No responsibility for crumbling roads or bridges. No responsibility for urban violence. No responsibility for the vulnerable, for the poor. In this view, each of us is on his or her own. Good luck. And the roles of government and of the courts is simply to assure that self-interest trumps the common interest every time. I reject that notion. The American Constitution Society rejects that notion, and so should you. Indeed, if the hard right is right, Adams is wrong. I'm with Adams. But as I see it, what's at stake is not just a matter of constitutional interpretation or political philosophy, but instead a question of the American character. Americans believe in equality, opportunity, and fair play, principles that define not just what America does, but who America is. America believes government is about people, not abstract policy, that politics are about vision and values, not winning at any cost. America believes in an economy that grows opportunity out to the strivers, not just up to the well-connected. America believes that we owe the next generation a better country than we found, not quick fixes that push the real solutions off to another day. America believes these principles because these things serve the common good. Today, when the debate about what freedom is, about what really serves the common good, about the role of government is sharper and less constructive in some ways than it has ever been, I ask you not to treat the debate as a spectator sport. If the real issue is what kind of America do we still believe in, then the question is too important to follow it just for the pundits' commentary and keeping political score. It's time to come off the sidelines and get in the game. America needs your participation. It needs you vocally to reject the politics of division and fear, of bullying and acting out, and to stand up for the common good. And America needs you to push me and all others in elected office to act in that spirit and only in that spirit. I got a letter just yesterday from an 80-something, a woman who lives in Quincy but who wrote about growing up in the West End, which is the neighborhood that City Hall now occupies. She described what it was like to wander that neighborhood as a child, up into and onto Beacon Hill and down around the Esplanade and along the Charles River. The wide variety of people, language, and food and culture. She wrote about how everyone seemed to be striving for the same American dream, and to respect and support that striving itself in each other. She described her community as America at work. still believe in that America. I still want others to believe in that America. Not because I'm not going to get mine. Not because you aren't going to get yours. But because there are thousands and thousands of our own neighbors, children who will never be able to imagine themselves in a space as glamorous and glorious as this, but who depend on us in our time to act in a common way. Let's do that work together.